When I first said to Joyce that we're going to build a house that will be built out of straw and have charred timber on it and crinkle it in, she was saying, is that a joke?
One thing to say is just this is probably my favourite house for all sorts of reasons, but it's also interesting how, the thing I've said before is that it's quite hard to photograph. So if you're judging it just from the photos, and you're a brilliant photographer, you make some of our houses which are not that special look brilliant. It's one of those ones you've got to visit.
The other thing is the atmosphere in it. What we used to call the soul quality is really good. I know it's a debatable subject because you can't quantify it, but I mean, it is an important thing. And a lot of people want that in a house.
So it's affordable, it's modest, but offers enough space. It kind of feels a bit like a TARDIS, you know, quite small from the outside, but because we've got these open cathedral ceilings, it just gives a really good sense of space.
With a small building, it looks interesting anyway because just the texture of materials is enough. When buildings become very big, that's not enough. So however characterful the render is or the brick, it still looks sort of big and bland. So you then start articulating the building and adding bits on because you think, oh, it looks a bit plain. But with a modest building, that's less of an issue, I think.
Yeah, I've noticed that bringing clients around here, that they're all really impressed, and they always say, oh, it's great, the size of it's really good, but then they can't stop themselves from wanting a bigger house.
So having it big enough, and especially with social housing, you know, there's often not enough room for normal life. But it's the extreme of the mansions and the rabbit hutches. Yeah. The big thing with embodied energy is having not too big and not too complicated and not too expensive.
Sufficiency.
Sufficiency, yeah.
It's quite hard for people who are interested in passive house, wanting to get into it or build one, to sort out that thing in their head with natural materials or energy efficiency, because you've got that complication where you can construct an argument to say that the embodied energy in a passive house isn't that important because you're going to save so much energy during the life of the house. So you end up with ICF blocks with another lump of insulation on the outside or something. But what's interesting about this system, the Cocon, it gives you a really instant prefabricated system that is genuinely low energy, and it is a sustainable system.
This is quite different from your traditional bale building because it is so consistent, and it's actually a passive house certified component, so you get all the kind of evidence and paperwork kind of that goes with it.
I love the fact you can shape it around the window reveals and stuff. It gives that lovely softening, so it does have a feeling like a cob building or masonry or stone.
Like it's been sort of hand sculpted almost, around
as you say, it's precise and all the windows fit and everything's
absolutely, So in a way, for a self-builder, there's a huge risk that is kind of just taken away from you, from the project.
Mike did our floor originally, and it was probably the first one we knew of that was the same sort of idea, the structural slab, polish finish, and it was a very cheap floor, and we love it and people love it. But if you want to guarantee a certain finish or a bespoke gravel or anything, that's when it gets tricky and can get expensive and things can go wrong at the last minute.
There are also some challenges with the concrete.
George changed very late on to a different mix because it was basically neat cement and the local ballast that George had chosen. So it didn't have the modern plasticizers and retarders in. And then it was a really hot day, and our ground worker arrived in the morning, limped out of his car and said, "I've hurt my knee, I'm not going to be able to help you." And so, it was really hard to keep up with it. Then George made a really sterling effort of, how long did you spend?
90 hours.
Grinding it. Like 90 hours grinding it to get it down to what you see.
So Mike, how did you find working with the system?
Overall, it was great. We did have problems with the weather. It is really critical to keep them dry, which is a challenge in Britain. They went together really well, yeah. It was all marked out well, and yeah, it was good.
The air tightness, that's been a challenge for other people building with bales, hasn't it? So how did you get on with that?
Yeah, so air tightness was achieved with the membrane, plus we had additional wood fibre insulation to give us the U values and eliminate any remaining thermal bridges.
A bit of a geeky thing, but air tightness on the outside is something we're normally nervous about, but that's sorted?
It was sorted. The membrane had to be a special membrane with quite high vapour openness, and it was all modelled in software to make sure we don't get the condensation issues. I think it was one of the biggest bargains on the house, the roof actually.
Yeah, that was good.
Very Australian detail.
Yeah. No, quite
Nice to see an architect
that.
use it simply as well, because they tend to take a cheap material and then do invisible gutters and some ironic flashings and stuff, and it suddenly becomes the most expensive roof you can build.
Yeah.
But just good honest material. The clay plaster, is that part of the system, isn't it?
It is part of the system, so we sort of try to use as many natural, non-processed materials as possible, and clay goes really well together with straw, and it provides really good, solid feel to the house as well. Yeah, we had this kind of plasterer from Slovakia, Roman, and he did a brilliant job.
He trained you as well, didn't he?
a little bit. I had a go. And then things like the external timber cladding, again, that was locally sourced cedar. But it was another kind of experiment, trying with charring, but it did take a long time. So we found the house, really comfortable all year round. We had some extremes, beast from the east, and temperatures are even kind of across the house. But there's no kind of central heating as such. We have these towel rails which are running off the hot water cylinder. They're like the background heat, and if it gets really cold, we tend to put a wood burner on.
And the fire, it's worth mentioning the fire, isn't it? Because that was something we disagreed on. I mean, it's tricky for me and Mike. We both live in houses with wood stoves, but we're sort of always telling people do as we say, not as we do. We're like reformed smokers.
I think you were right.
Yeah.
It took a few years for you to actually come round to thinking, actually, I wish I'd spent the money on something else.
And the image of sitting around the roaring fire of a focal point in the evening just doesn't really happen, does it? Because by the time you lit it, it's warm enough and it's gone out. So we've been around for an evening. It's never still lit. It's always warm. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that draws people to passive houses is the indoor air quality. You hardly had the wood burner on. The amount of black soot in the MVHR filter just shows you the amount of filth that comes out of them.
It's a real kind of refuge during these extreme weathers. You can not worry about what's going on outside.
Yeah.
There's always a discussion in passive house circles about form factor, and of course being single story is a challenge. And then you've dipped it in, but actually here that really works. It's not just because it looks boring in plan, we need to articulate it. That creates that lovely area, does the overhang. You go from the box, it's more expensive, but it's a question of, so then you'll say, is it giving me some value for money? And here I think it really does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and when it gets like super hot, we can just put a sail up, additional sail, so that sort of creates nice shade for the decking. Consistent, and temperatures are even kind of across the house, so couldn't be happier really.
Some people worry that it'll be too boring. There's some academics sort of say, it's 20 degrees passive house, but it's not, is it?
Absolutely fine.
Boring, it's not too comfortable.
No, we love it.